further layoffs. And to be clear, this is after Meta has had a crap ton of layoffs since 2022, right? Let's see here. Tens of thousands of jobs, approximately 11,000 jobs gone in 2022, 10,000 jobs gone in 2023, and they're getting rid of at least 8,000 jobs, as I talked about not that long ago. So, yeah, so we're already at the point where Meta, one single technology company, has already laid off 30,000 people in the last couple of years. And yeah, I just don't think any of this is over yet. And as I would say, it's not even funny to argue or debate anymore. It was weird. We're getting to this point, like being an old timer in the field, where I'm just having to shut up around the young people because I just don't want to be the depressing person all the time. I was at a party a little while ago, and I don't know, we were talking about layoffs and all that kind of stuff. And it was all these like younger, like it's weird. It's like adults, they're adults and they got kids and houses and spouses, but they're also like 15 years younger than me. And I don't know, we got on this whole thing about layoffs or whatever, the economy. And then, this one guy was like, it's okay. It's okay. Companies always need smart people. Which was a point that I smiled and swigged my beer and walked the fuck away. Because it's like, yeah, companies always do need smart people, I suppose. The fact of the matter is, they don't necessarily need you. They probably don't need you. So anyways, what's going on over here, right? And I find that to be the hard thing right now, like talking about the economy. Is I've been talking about this for a while. Again, as I've said before, in the tech world, we got enough technology professionals in about 2016 and about 2017. Like literally, I've been talking about this long before COVID or Biden or whatever that kind of crap, right? And basically, the argument that I made before is I was listening to this angel investor, and basically, his investing thesis, what he would invest in 60 startup companies with the expectation that two would be home runs, approximately 10 would have some kind of adequate return, and every other startup would fail miserably. And so when you look at that means 48 startups of employees and resources and everything else were basically going directly in a trash can. And you start looking at it, and you're like, oh wow, that basically means that if people invested a little bit more wisely, you could probably eliminate a lot of that wastage right there. Right? Instead of throwing money out at all these different companies, do a little bit more research, do a little bit more homework, and maybe 20 of these companies wouldn't even exist to begin with. But then if they're not using those resources because they don't exist, then those resources are back on the market. Ergo, what happens? What happens to our field? So again, I've been talking about this for a long time. And I think basically what happened again during COVID, everything exploded for stupid reasons. They were trying to chase investor money, so they put asses in seats. Now they're trying to liquidate. Basically, they're trying to impress investors again by eliminating employees because they're using AI, supposedly. And one of the big concerns I have here is like when we look at this, you're like, oh my golly. Well, thankfully, it's over. And that's what people think. Oh, it's like, well, it sucks that Meta got rid of 30,000 employees, but at least it's over now. And one of my arguments with all this crap show is no. They are simply right sizing or getting somewhere near to right sizing based off of a healthy economic environment. Like again, like even in 2022, 2021, they should have never hired all of these employees to begin with. They were most likely bloated in 2020. In January of 2020, before COVID blew up, I put on the table that I think they were bloated with tech staff at that point in time. And basically, then they exploded even more. So now they're getting back to, again, early 2020 levels. I would argue it's probably still bloated, but that is for a good economic environment where things are growing and things are doing well and all that kind of stuff. Think about this. Strait of Hormuz is still shut for God knows how long, right? Tariffs are still insane. Our administration is doing what our administration is doing. The rest of the world is doing what the rest of the world is doing. Does that sound like a good economic environment? So they eliminated 30,000 plus staff to simply right size onto a good economic environment. What's what's going to happen, when they actually start having to plan for the economic environment that we're actually in and going into. It was interesting, right? I just did the final class for Silicon Dojo a couple of days ago. One of the students was asking a question about business intelligence and that type of thing, and basically how you argue for your projects or whatever based off numbers and metrics and that type of deal. And one of the things that I had to tell the student is, like, one of the problems that I see, again, I've been doing tech since for 30 years, right? 96, shipped up to basic in 96. One of the things I have to say is when I got out of the corporate world, the consulting world, is that we knew all of our metrics back then. Like there was the idea of drilling down into metrics, understanding the difference between causation and correlation and that type of thing. But we all had numbers, right? The salespeople had numbers, the marketing people had numbers, your tech staff had numbers. Like every motherfucker had numbers. You know who was doing best, and you knew who was doing worse. There was arguments about like the point value of different tasks or whatever else. But anyway, you basically knew where people were more or less in the hierarchy. One of the things that I found interesting, again, since 2012, me getting out of that world, is as I talk with more executives and I talk with more employees, how they don't have numbers anymore. Like, I don't understand this. This doesn't make sense to me. You know how many motherfuckers I talk to? They don't have numbers anymore. So there becomes this really interesting argument about how do you argue for the value of your position or your team when you numbers aren't even being tracked. And so I think what's going to happen is basically a lot of these people, the reason the numbers are not being tracked. Again, you go back to the old world. We cared about revenue. We cared about profit, right? You had to have a return on investment, right? If you had a line employee, if you had an employee that was bringing money into the company, their salary was more or less a fourth, 25% of whatever they brought into the company. They bring 400 grand into the company every year. They get about $100,000, more or less horseshoes and hand grenades. It does get a little bit more wonky, but that was basically the idea, right? We knew the number, but here's the thing. Over the past 10 some odd years, again, it's all been focused on investors. It's all been focused on investors and investment. Revenue doesn't matter. Profit doesn't matter. Right? They've been coming up with all kinds of weird metrics to prove why their company is valuable. But here's the thing, right? If the company itself doesn't really care about revenue and profit, then think about all the employees. Like what metrics are you tracking employees off of? And so here's going to be the thing. Here's going to be the thing. What happens when your company has to deal with revenue, when profit actually starts mattering again? And what happens when these companies they don't have their KPIs? Again, like one of the big issues right now with deployment of artificial intelligence. And again, when I talk about artificial intelligence, I don't really care about AI, how they talk about it. It's more automated systems. Again, it's literally computerized systems, computerized decision-making systems, computerized reporting systems, that type of thing, right? Whether you're using a neural network to power it or fucking SQL database. Basically, it's just automation. Here's one of the most interesting things for deploying artificial intelligence into the real corporate environment is most people don't actually know what their employees do. Like, think about this for a second, right? Because that's the first thing. If you're going to automate processes, then you have to understand the step-by-step tasks that employees do, and then you start slotting the automation in. Again, we talk about that with workflows. Workflows are these systems for how work is supposed to be accomplished. The biggest problem right now is for many of these companies, they haven't actually cared about their employees for way too many years. Again, so they don't care about RTO, KPIs, and all that, or ROI, KPIs, and that type of deal. And so they truly don't understand things like workflows. And so the thing is how do you slot AI in to workflows you haven't bothered to create? Right, that is the real bottleneck with automation systems right now. And so as these companies go, they're going to have to start figuring this stuff out because money is going to start to matter. And so that's where this becomes very concerning as you look at a company like Meta, right? And again, Meta is doing good. Look, Meta is profitable. Meta is a $1.54 trillion company. Again, however, however you feel about Facebook, and I have some feelings about Facebook, the reality is, look, it's a pretty decent business, right? Facebook is making money. Instagram is making money. I'm not really sure with WhatsApp, but otherwise, they're basically cash printers. So think about this. The cash printing company already laid off 30 plus thousand employees in the last couple of years. It's not over yet. Meta just told staff it isn't ruling out further layoffs. Meta plans to lay off around 10% of its staff next month, and it told staff it's not ruling out deeper cuts. 10%, and they're saying they might do more. And that's what Janelle Gale, Meta's chief people officer, told employees at an internal meeting on Thursday, according to sources. Quote, will there be more layoffs? The question always comes up. I'd love to say that there are no more layoffs, but I can't say something we can't deliver. So again, think about this, especially in like the tech world and Silicon Valley world, man, they lie all the time. These motherfuckers lie all the time. How do you know when Silicon Valley founders lying? Their lips are moving. Come on, you know it's true. I mean, it is just true. And so think about this. Because again, as I talked about before, optics. Optics is incredibly important for organizations, right? Optics for investors, optics for employees, optics for vendors. Everybody's got to make plans. Everybody's got to make bets. The whole nine yards. So even if it's crap, even if it's horse crap, a lot of times you'll say things for the optics. And so think about this with a technology company. 30 plus thousand layoffs in the last couple of years. And they are not even trying to present the optics to their employees that it's over. That's bad. It's like when you watch The Boys. I've been watching the last season of The Boys. It's weird. I watched like season 1 of The Boys, and now I'm watching the last season of The Boys. But anyways, it's like when you're watching The Boys, and like all of the people realize like the lies have gotten so stupid that it's almost impossible to say the lies anymore. It's like go out and tell the employees that everything's gonna be okay, and then you just see the chief person's eye, and it's like I just can't do it. Let's see here. Gail said during the meeting, quote, while the business is strong, priorities change, competition is fierce, and we will continue to manage our costs responsibly. And so again, I mean, just think about those words. Just think about whatever, optics and all that kind of stuff, right? So they're saying business is strong, right? They're making money, 1.5 trillion company, the whole 9 yards. But we might still have to fire a few tens of thousands of more folks. That is not a good sign. And that's for a company that's doing again decently well. Again, their CEO is going to say crazy, but